I hereby open debate on this motion for public business, and I invite Shining Zhao, University College, Member of Secretariat Committee, to propose the motion.
Good evening, everyone. It is my greatest honor to address a speech here in such a historic debate chamber tonight. When I first got the topic of today's debate, as a second-year student doing physics, I do consider science, especially physics, as an important way to view and understand our world. Yet, I must note that to recognize science's importance and value to how we understand our world is one thing. To posit that it can resolve our greatest questions is another. Humanity's greatest questions include questions of morality, of political justice, of why we exist, and what ends we should pursue. Science may offer us bits and pieces of insights, but in no way does it suffice in answering these questions. Before I begin my speech, I would like to introduce our guests tonight. From opposition, we have Professor Ijeoma Uchegbu, a prize-winning professor who researches in pharmaceutical nanoscience. I found that Professor Uchegbu has written quite a lot of papers about brains, and I hope that she will agree with me that science can tell us how our brains work, but cannot tell what biggest questions it is thinking about. After all, we may well be just brains in vats. Professor Frank Tipler, as a mathematical physicist and cosmologist, wrote an intriguing book called The Physics of Christianity and claimed God as a cosmological singularity. However, I find it surprising that the God cosmological singularity only needs 6 days to create human from nothing according to Genesis. Claiming that Christianity can be accounted for through science just doesn't necessarily make it real science. Professor Peter Atkins is a former professor at the University of Oxford. Professor Atkins is famous for his chemistry textbooks, but even more famous for his atheism. Professor Atkins, you have a great night debating the existence of God with the two professors on the proposition side. From my side of proposition, we have Dr. Dennis Alexander, a molecular biologist and an author on science and religion. Dr. Alexander is also the emeritus director of the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion. We also have Professor Richard Swinburne, an emeritus professor of philosophy at the University of Oxford. Professor Swinburne has been an influential proponent of philosophical arguments for the existence of God over the last 50 years. He has also been an equally influential member of the reading list of many PPE and theology students in Oxford. Mr. President, these are your guests, and they're warmly welcomed. Prior to my discussion, I find it necessary to first define what our biggest questions are. Our biggest questions should be the ones that have been confusing us humans since ancient times and remain meaningful to our individual life and civilization as a whole now and hence. These questions include, but should not be limited to, our conception of the world, philosophical queries, concerns of justice and humanity, and theological and spiritual issues. Let's be very clear here. Science, as knowledge or a system of knowledge covering general truths or the operation of general laws, especially as obtained and tested through scientific methods, can be our tool of exploring the objective world. Great philosophical, humanistic, or theological questions, however, cannot be answered by science alone. Let's start with one simple but meaningful question. Who am I? The scientists on the other bench may tell me that I'm a creature belonging to the Homo genus called Homo sapiens, in short, human. Science can give us a range of behavioral characteristics, but this is definitely not the whole answer to this question. Because when I ask you to identify yourself, you will resort to explanations that far exceed, in complexity and vividness, merely the fact that you are a bundle of cells and nerves with evolutionary purposes. Since ancient Greek times, to know thyself becomes an important concept, with Socrates saying that the unexamined life is not worth living. Such a process of knowing yourself requires introspection and meditation, with its result a derived consequence of your own philosophical thought instead of scientific proof. You're not merely the one that others describe you as. You are more about who you define yourself as. Your characters, your values, your life goals, they all belong to the answers of the essential question, who you are. These can be approached only by self-reflection and shaped by the reading of philosophy, and can never be examined by scientific experiments. Such a way of introspection is also indispensable in other philosophical questions. The difference in methodology made philosophy, besides science, necessary and irreplaceable in answering our biggest questions. Another aspect of philosophy is that there isn't an absolute truth for many problems. Morality, defined as principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior, is an important construction part of our civilization and is definitely one of our biggest questions. However, moral issues are never something that absolute, and neither can they be proved or disproved by science. Moral values vary across culture, time, social environment, and individuals. In the traditional Chinese culture, filial piety is a great virtue, while here in the Western culture, individualism may have more importance. Values vary according to culture, yet merely an empirical approach to morality is in no way enough. For more evidence of the fallibility of conflating the is and the all, see Jordan Peterson and his understanding of morality through observing lobster behaviors. It is discriminative and arrogant to claim one culture's morality is superior to another's, and we should tolerate the fact that there isn't an absolute correct morality. Different moral value systems have different intrinsic logic, and that something is right to do is more about personal judgment and the social consensus rather than scientific proof. One's personal logic of his or her own moral tenets may not be true to another person, which means that such a logical proof is not general and therefore not scientific. The lack of definitiveness in moral issues is in a sense beyond the scope reachable and resolvable by science. As a subject seeking a singular, universal truth, science cannot answer questions without a distinct answer. The improvement of science may affect our moral values, but it's our own philosophical thinking and value system that defines and answers what morality is. Some scientists may argue that artificial intelligence may one day answer the question of morality. However, machine learning is always based on materials created by humans, and the algorithms are as well written by humans. The result that a computer can give us is just either the bias of the writer of the algorithm or the representation of the values of the sample people that is studied on. Science can assist us in our exploration of moral issues, but it cannot answer them. The lack of an absolute answer in moral issues made science unable to answer such a biggest question. Some others of our biggest questions, such as understanding the current world, require a thorough apprehension of humanity and cannot be covered by science. Science do have the power to predict some aspects of the future. Professor Frank Tipler said in his TED Talk that the ultimate future of human will be interstellar traveling. A biologist may make assertions in how species, including human, would evolve in far future. Nevertheless, science alone cannot tell us how our current society works or will work. Our society is in huge extent formed by its culture, which the study of history will trace back to its origin and demonstrate how it developed. History can help us understand our nowadays society and give us some hints of the future trend. Such a humanistic study can never be replaced by scientific approach. Computer science may be able to record some past events, but it cannot have the understanding of the intrinsic correlation between an event and its causes. People will perceive our world differently, and the comprehension of history is not about what has happened, but about how you see things happen. It is a combination of objective facts and a subjective opinion. Science or computing can be a way to gain the objective facts and process them as asked by human, but science lacks the nuance and finesse required to draw conclusions and observe trends on the most macroscopic level of human interactions. Such an attribute of science makes humanities studies irreplaceable in understanding our world and making predictions of the future. While current society is like and will be, it's vital to everyone, and it definitely belongs to our biggest questions. Finally, answering the question about existence of deity is just beyond the capability of science. Humanity has always been curious about the existence of any supernatural power, and this definitely should be one of our biggest questions. Today, I am not here to either prove the existence of God or to disprove it. Instead, I want to tell you that such a matter is just about a belief. Being irreligious is all about trusting the existence of God, and such a belief may be based on personal spiritual experiences or the records of others. And being atheistic is also a belief that the world is not ruled by a supernatural power, but instead prescribed laws. But no matter which way you believe in, you cannot make a scientific proof of it. One basic prerequisite for science to be true is that there exists such a general law which everything follows it in the world, and that this general law will not change according to the will of a supernatural power. Therefore, it is a circular argument and hence illogical to claim that the non-existence of God can be proved by a subject based on this assertion. I would find it even more illogical if a non-existence of God can be disproved by science. Some scientists may claim that scientific truths confront with words in the Bible, but this is just about pointing out the imperfectness of a classic, and in no way disproves the existence of supernatural being. Therefore, our question of whether deity exists cannot be proved or answered by science. Tonight, I give this speech in no way trying to undermine the importance of science. Instead, I just want to prove to everyone in this chamber that science is not omnipotent in solving our largest problems. The characteristics of methodology of science, the lack of definitiveness, definite answer to moral issues, the necessity of humanity in comprehending our society, and the incapability of science to testify supernatural powers. All these attributes made it impossible for science alone to answer our biggest questions. Tonight, when you are walking out of this debating chamber, I would like to urge you to vote for proposition as an agreement that philosophy, humanistic studies, and comprehension of theology are always irreplaceable. These fields of studies touch the essence that makes us human. We can try to understand the objective world with science, but we need the combination of science with philosophy, humanities, and theology to answer our biggest questions. Thank you very much.